morning, everyone. This is the Cerberus Radio Network doing the traditional and world famous Good Morning Cerberus, waking up the world with our happiness, joy, and love, with pure truth to throw at you. So get your mitts on, get ready to catch it. We have in the studio Suzanne Sherman today, and in the hinterlands of Neverland, Mr. Jeff, I can produce that, Johnson. Good morning, Suzanne.
Good morning, Junk Bond. How are you today?
I am more awesomer.
You and Sander, aka Booger, had an amazing show yesterday. I want to do a quick recap on that once we get rolling here. But for those of you just waking up with us, today is Friday, March 22nd, year of our Lord 2019. I think we're in the second or third day of spring here, but somebody needs to tell that to the weatherman in Utah because old man winter is still here. We're still getting snow. And
Really?
So I'm still waiting to warm up here, but yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
and let's
Because
see
if
what.
you have the snow, we're not going to have the snow out where we're at.
Well, I was prepared for that when I moved here. Living in California, we've got the four seasons, fire, floods, earthquakes, and riots. So I do appreciate the seasons we have here, but it is time for the snow to stop and to move on. I don't think we have any more storms scheduled other than for rain. Anyway, this is not the Weather Channel. This is the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend freedom and liberty from the flames of tyranny. You can catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. Want to welcome all of the new subscribers and members of the CRN fan page. I'm going to share with you a commentary I got from someone that they posted the other day. I'm really pleased with all the people that are starting to pay attention and get the word out. As I've said time and time again, it's an uphill battle dealing with these leftist tech giants. And you see what's allowed to stay up on Facebook, and then you see what people are getting shut down for. We need our listeners to spread the word and help. We're also on SoundCloud. If you can't listen live, subscribe to that one. We have content. We just added another one on there. I was telling Jeff before we went live about a new study regarding ADHD meds. I'm going to touch on that briefly. And we just added a show from last February with Dr. Marianne Block from the Block Center, who had a very compelling story. I'll get more into that when I get into that realm. We also have a YouTube page where you can listen live and join the chat room. I want to thank those that join and follow us there regularly and contribute as well. Junk Bond, did I leave anything out? It's early for me, and my alarm woke me up from a sound sleep. I was up in the middle of the night and then went to sleep maybe an hour before the alarm went off. Don't you love when it happens?
I do. That happened to me just yesterday, as a matter of fact. Yeah, one thing was left out. There's something I have to correct from yesterday, and that is I cited the Hungarian Rhapsody #5. In fact, it was the Hungarian Rhapsody #2. Jeff Johnson was quick to correct me. I was slow to notice. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that yes, I knew it was a Hungarian Rhapsody, but numbers confuse me. And besides, it's all statistics anyway, so a little bit of error here and there is definitely acceptable.
Well, you got the Bugs Bunny part right, and that's what really was important there. Hey, I got, after your text yesterday, after your show yesterday, I got a text from Booger, and he asked if I had the impression that from your show yesterday, because we are a Christian network here, that it was a message that was anti-Christian. And my response to him was, I will let, because I heard part of the show, not the whole thing. I thought it was a really good show, that I would have Greg do a quick recap on that show. And the fact is, we will present facts. We don't take sides. If facts appear unfavorable to one aspect of a story, we're not going to ignore it. Some radio stations, depending, or any media outlets, will cheer on Hillary Clinton regardless of her misdeeds, and then criticize Trump for allegedly bad behavior with regards to, for instance, women or security. So, we call balls and strikes here, folks, and that's why some people don't want to listen to us if we say stuff that's going to challenge their way of thinking. But that being said, why don't you just do a quick recap so people can go to see yesterday's episode of The Spy Who Loves Liberty? They're always outstanding shows, but clear up maybe any misconceptions that some people might have been
And
left with.
before he does that, it's on SoundCloud. Anyone out there wants to hear it, and it's right at the top. It's in the top 5. We have 5 highlighted shows, and your last, the Wasatch Report is on top, and Greg, your Spy Who Loves Liberty, is right on top. So it's right there on top. You don't even have to search for it.
Is mine on top, or is it below The Spy Who Loves Liberty?
You have second billing. You're right below Spy Who Loves Liberty.
Demerit for you.
Wow. Okay. So quick recap from yesterday. We started at 9 a.m. and we ended at 10 a.m. Eastern. Now, a little bit more detailed.
Can
quick
everybody hear
recap.
me rolling my eyes in the background?
We'll include the content this time because that'll take a little bit longer. So we spoke of things that happened with Christianity, Islam, and the Jewish community that were not necessarily known to everybody. We covered a little bit in depth, not too deep, the massacre in Jerusalem in 1099 by the Crusaders. And it was the Muslims and Jews that were fighting side by side. Jerusalem was living in a state of peace under Muslim rule, with Muslims, Jews, and Christians all living together. The Crusaders came in and destroyed that peace and set up what was to be a military dictatorship, pretty much, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and changed the relationship between Christians and Jews forevermore. Before that time, the Christians and Jews lived together rather uh, quiet, humble manners throughout medieval Europe for hundreds of years. They had coexisted and intermingled. After that, there was a huge divide between the Christian and Jewish community. Word got out that Jews were wholesale slaughtered by the Crusaders, and the same thing with the Muslims. And you can look back to any number of reasons why these things happened and why it came out the way it did. We just presented the fact of what happened. And we talked about the fact of that religion is a kind of like a fee for service, like you would get from your healthcare provider, no matter what religion it is. You go in the door, you give them money, you're getting something back. You're giving money to the guy who runs the place, and you're getting something back. This is just at the very basic level. Again, we're not talking about the benefits or problems with any specific religion. We weren't talking about um, the similarities and differences, other than the couple that we mentioned that, you know, all religion in their basic doctrine really say, don't kill other people, um, be nice to your neighbor, some commonalities. So, for example, in Islam, there's more than one book, there's more than the Quran. But in the Quran, much like in the Bible, in the beginning of it, it tells them, be nice, be loving. Booker had several discussions, and he studied the Quran under some imams for a very extended period of time. And I have no problem with, because I did not read the full Quran, nor have I read all of the other Islamic holy books. I can't tell you the full extent. I've read extracts and from the different books, but not every single part of every one. But when he presented what he presents, then I take that at face value because he has done the research. He has uh, looked behind it to find out what's really happening. And again, with Christianity and with Judaism, you have the same type of a scenario where they don't attack other people according to doctrine. When Christians go in and conquer a place, they take over the business aspects of different countries and they start to economically run and manage them. In Islam, they'll take and they'll put a mosque where a church used to be. And this is what we got into when we discussed the New Zealand shooter. His concerns were all cultural, not necessarily religion, but this was the key factor in him identifying which target he was going to pick out. He said he didn't have a specific target that he was looking at, but when he saw that, he saw his culture completely disintegrating. And it probably was disintegrating at that point because we made the point that if the church isn't being used and it gets converted into a mosque, it wasn't forcibly converted into a mosque. It was passively converted through a sale because nobody was going to church. So his culture was already disintegrating. It lost the religious aspect, much like the West in general has lost the religious aspect of what they do and how they do it. Islam has not lost that. They still have that fire for religion. And anytime you have fire for religion, you can you can guarantee that there's going to be some bloodshed. Booger mentioned to us, anytime anybody says that they've heard from, directly from the word of God, be it whatever religion it is, you can guarantee there's going to be some bodies piling up somewhere because that seems to be an instigating factor around the world
Yeah,
because it is
God
emotionally based.
God
Yeah,
is on their side. Yeah.
right. It's all emotionally based. Look at Constantine. I mean, there's a good Christian example for you, other than some of the other Muslim leaders that have went out and done the same thing. You can pick and choose and shape an argument any way you want, but the bottom line is that people by nature, when emotionally charged to do something, will whip up into a bigger fever than they will if you logically approach them with an argument and you discuss the facts with them about it, and they can come to a logical, objective decision. Emotionality always whips up people into a bigger frenzy. And as with Peter the Hermit, who had the Crusaders march around Jerusalem barefoot in the desert, right? Because he had a vision that this was going to happen just like Jericho, right? These guys were whipped up into a frenzy. Did the walls fall down when they marched around it? No. But they were so ready to go, so ready to conquer that it didn't matter that they didn't have food, that they didn't have water. They were just ready to go. And that's kind of a little bit of a recap of the variety of things we discussed yesterday.
So if you missed that episode and are intrigued now based on this conversation, or just say, I want nothing to do with it, it's your choice. This is a voluntary radio station here. Give that show.
It's an all volunteer force, folks.
Yes, exactly. I thought it was a fascinating show. All of your shows are. I mean, your shows are always things that make you go, wow, not just So also another announcement I forgot to make, Prepper Chicks, her show, Prepper Chicks After Dark, is now on, I think it's at the 10 p.m. Eastern time slot on Radio Co. So you can hear her. We'll be airing her weekly podcasts and they'll be replaying on our Radio Co. So we're delighted to have her. I've talked about it before. Yeah.
How sexy is that? Prepper Chicks After Dark.
Right? Kind of racy,
What's the rating on this? Yeah.
It's maybe PG-13. There's maybe a minor language indiscretion here and there. Nothing like when I'm at my house doing yard work and my mowers, nothing like that. But just minor. But so just be prepared.
She's gonna be at the 10 o'clock hour right now. Her first show is it was on Thursday night at 10 o'clock. And it's in that it'll replay again next Thursday at 10. And as I get the other one edited and up, I'll put it in, and then Tuesdays, if we can work out the logistics with her, she will go live at 10 p.m. So,
Ooh, nice.
Yes, and
so anyway,
as I improve or maybe learn some more of these tech skills, like I said, I did design a website, by the way, SuzanneCSherman.com. And as I learn some more of these skills, when Jeff's unavailable, maybe I'll record some shows with her and myself. We have a lot in common. Like I said, when I first started learning about preparedness, I stumbled across her site early on in Facebook, and I followed her and really enjoyed her material and her commentary and her selection of advice. So I'm delighted that we have become friends. She's also an accomplished author, Annie Burdell Alpha Farm series. So do check them out. And I also appreciate that she does mention our network on her show as well. So other announcement too, I recently posted a blog about the Sixth Circuit, Sixth District Court of Appeal. I think it was a circuit court that was that ruled that the police officers have to suck it up if you give them the finger. And if you look at that article, the title is Federalism Gets the Finger. The 10th Amendment Center has also decided to run with that as well. So I'm delighted that we'll be publishing that article. Junk Bond, before we went on the air, you sent a link about the airplane crash and a computer glitch. Let's do a little bit of some breaking news, and then we'll get into the meat and taters of the show today and what we have.
Oh boy, talk about broken news.
By the way, really quick, we're going to be talking about more of the surveillance state. San Diego, they're saying it has Chinese-like surveillance. We've been discussing social credit. Facebook had a really creepy question about pedophilia, YouTube banning videos, Amazon, I told you they're banning books. We'll get into federalism and gun control and more on the Electoral College. So go ahead, Junk Bond, run with that. Pardon the interruption.
No problem at all. Please go. You know, I'm here for your abuse and use.
We have 2 hours to talk over each other.
I know this is going to be exciting. So it turns out that my statement regarding the computer issues that the TWA, excuse me, the TW. Listen to me. I'm lost back with TWA 800 investigation still. With boy, oh boy, with the 737 Maxes from Boeing, it turns out that it is a computer issue more than we ever thought. What's happened is Boeing charges for a software upgrade, which is not required according to international regulations, but many countries don't purchase. And this is the software upgrade that tells the pilot, gives the pilot the option and turns on the light that says that the angle of attack is too much or the angle of attack is too little or when you're taking off. Ergo, they did not have notification of what was happening on the plane at the time. So they were taking off normally.
So is it fair to say that
over?
That's important information? Sorry, I'm going to jump in. Is that important information? Is that pretty relevant?
It's a little bit important, I think, if you want to survive. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because without knowing that the what the angle of attack is or what the angle of descent is exactly, you can definitely tank the plane all on your own. The computer is supposed to notify you if you exceed or go under a certain angle. There's a range. If you go under, then you're not climbing fast enough and you have an issue when you're taking off. If it exceeds it, then you have the chance of stalling the plane, putting it into a catastrophic failure. So either way is not good. If you don't go up high enough, then you could definitely hit trees or be in the line of other aircraft that are in the flight pattern. If you go up too high, like I said, you could stall the plane. This software upgrade costs money. They don't give it for free. This is capitalism at its worst. They withhold this because it's not a required feature, but it's built. So the problem is that the the self-correcting aspect of the software package is built into the plane. The notification that the plane is self-correcting is not built into it. So you don't have the awareness that the computer on the plane is doing this for you. So the pilots think that when the angle changes, that there's something wrong. So they go to correct it. And when they correct it, they're trying to fight against the computer because the computer is already pre-programmed to correct the problem. So
Those
you can see
raging against the machine.
Clever. Clever. Easy there, producer. We're the talent here, not you.
If I want your opinion, I'll beat it out of you, Jeff. So basically, you have the situation where failure was inevitable once you go outside of the variance for the range of what's allowable. And that's what happened. No more laughing, Suzanne. I can see that. Keep your microphone on. Stay stable. Stay with me on this. Because this is it's terrible. But I think it's even worse because this is not necessarily just a capitalistic thing that's happening here. These guys make a ton of stinking money as it is. And I understand the nature of business to weasel out a penny here, a penny there, and all that stuff. But don't you think that this actually crosses the line? This actually becomes a moral issue in my impression, because if you're going to have the computer do something that's going to affect the way the plane is flown, affect what happens in the air, then you should, I don't know, you should tell them so they know that this is what's going to happen, so they're not surprised, so they don't try to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed, or they go ahead and they're able to engage with the knowledge and understanding that this correction is going to happen. You can't have it both ways, and you can't. I don't see any. I don't see any moral way of withholding information like that and not including that in the singular package myself, unless there's something else that is going on at Boeing that we're not privy to regarding selling of this software and stuff. But this is just it's to me it's amazing that they did not share the fact that the computer would actually change the elevation of the plane and change the angle of the plane. And these poor pilots are sitting here. In one instance, they said, well, it's pilot error because they didn't have enough training with the new plane. I can see that. I can understand that. But I mean, what happens when you don't know that the plane's going to do something? What do you call that? Is that pilot error still? I don't think it can be called pilot error. I think it has to be a manufacturer's design that led to the point where this plane came down, just like the other one. I don't know. What do you think, Suzanne?
It seems to me an ethical issue. If they're going to have these upgrades, like you said, that affect the behavior of the airplane unbeknownst to the pilot, forget the passengers. I'd never heard of this. I had no idea that the people flying the planes, operating the planes, had to take an affirmative step to know they could continue to do so safely by purchasing software upgrades from the company that sold them the plane in the first place. Again, I am all for free markets, but this is how we get government intervention when we have unethical behavior like this. I mean, I seriously don't know if I even want to deal with getting on an airplane. The TSA makes it bad enough. So this is we had a friend he passed away, I think 30 years ago, but this is when he flew for Delta. They had a plane that was introduced that really took away a lot of the intuitive skills of the pilots. And this guy said that so many of them were terrified of this plane because they really did not know what it was going to do or
Mhm.
how to handle it. And this friend of our family, he died of a heart attack in his 40s. Flying got so stressful for him. He was fit, he ran, he was in really good shape, took good care of himself, but the stress of the job over these new planes, we all think caused his demise. So again, something I
Wow.
was never aware of, that they would actually sell software that would keep planes in the air, literally. Again, not saying we need a government to force them to do so, but that's kind of scary. I came
It
across
is.
an article also yesterday. Do we want to wrap this topic up, Jeff? Did you want
I
to contribute? Don't have your feelings hurt because we kind of poked a little fun at you earlier.
Oh, that's okay. It is interesting that that Captain Sully, the one that landed his plane on the river, he is bashing Boeing and the FAA for
Mhm.
computer
Wow.
information, this lack of computer information. And honestly, if the plane is going to correct itself, yeah, it's very important that the pilots know why it's doing it, because if they are, I was joking about the whole Rage Against the Machine, but they were in a sense raging against the machine because they were trying to correct something the computer was doing, and they were fighting against each other. And in the end,
Sure.
everyone died, and that's the tragedy. Is
Sure.
the
Yeah.
computer should not have this power that's going to wreck the plane because it's not letting the pilots know that there's a problem. So it really is. And again, I'm not calling for government intervention in this.
Yes, you are. You
This
want
is,
you want
but
the government all over this, Jeff.
here's the thing: it's a tragedy for the families. They've lost family members, but they have a civil. Option here. They're going to sue, and it's going to cost Boeing a lot of money. Is that a perfect world? No, but
Yeah, but for
is what
Boeing, that's pennies on the dollar, though.
right. It is.
That's where the real tragedy lies in all of this, is that it's not going to cost them anything except a little bit of advertising and maybe some business because of that. Because the airlines are the ones who have to front the most issues from this. They're the ones that have to shoulder it, excuse me, because they're the ones who are flying these planes now. It's not Boeing that's flying the planes. What are people going to do to Boeing? They're going to, oh, you're bad. Boeing bad, right? And okay, so what else? Well, they're not directly affected by Boeing. So that level of abstraction actually keeps Boeing safe from being demonized in the public's eyes, in a way that it's going to actually affect their sales.
Because we
Most of
know
their
it.
sales are from government in the first place. So what does that matter?
Yeah, we
And
know.
they're a big defense contractor anyway, so the government's going to keep
Yeah,
spending billions and billions of dollars there.
And when we
exactly.
see these stories covered, we all identify with the brand name of the airline, not the manufacturer of the airplane. So that's probably the one that people think about. Oh, the Delta crash or the United crash. They always link them with the airline itself as opposed to the manufacturer. And
Right.
again, Boeing does just fine with their bombs and everything else. They
And
Right.
make.
here,
So
you
part
know,
of this is the
it,
fact that, okay, maintenance for some airlines is supposed to be at a certain level of expertise. And maybe it's not, right, for everybody. But okay, you still have the basic requirement to send out a baseline of software packages inside of any product that's out there. um, Now, the same problem happens with Microsoft. The same problem happens with Dell, right? The Microsoft products on a Dell computer will screw up, causing big time issues. The semantic antivirus on a Dell computer protecting Microsoft stuff will catastrophically fail and allow viruses and hackers to get in and stuff like that. So, I mean, again, in this situation, I mean, who are you really going to point the finger at? Who are you really blaming?
no, they're obviously going to blame the airlines again, and unfortunately, there's not really a whole lot of recourse other than getting government involved, and that, and again, uh, it, the collusion between government and corporations is what has gotten us into this big mess we're in anyway. But the airlines could go over and buy Airbus. Are we having the same problem with Airbus that we're having with the Boeing with their computers? I haven't been hearing a lot of stories of Airbus planes crashing, but maybe they're out there.
Yeah, they very well could be. I don't know either very much, but who knows? Who knows?
All right.
Anyway, Suzanne, you want to take us on to the next topic?
Yeah, actually yesterday I saw a movie. I thought it would be a lot better than it was. It was called Captive State. You guys know me. I love these post-APOC movies, survival movies, that sort of thing. And this one actually, I always get a little annoyed when they make them because of an alien invasion or something like that, because we have so many more interesting and realistic topics upon which to base such a
Don't
movie.
do not pick on my brother aliens and sister aliens out there, okay?
That
This
being
is
said,
you cut me right to the bone. That's just
but for the aliens, I told my friend that I saw the movie with, I said, "Hey, you know what? If it weren't for the aliens, this movie would be pretty true to form. It was an absolute modern day police state and chaos." And we talked, yeah,
Did Trump build a wall?
right. We're going to get into a little more of that too. I found a great article.
I'm gonna get him an erector set for Christmas.
Well, I just knew we were talking about aliens. I just thought they built a wall.
These
Absolutely.
were so illegal. They were
Okay.
so illegal. They weren't even from south of our border here. But here's the interesting thing was the police state that was set up, the propaganda that conquered, like the whole, all the government, the legislators, they were like the rules. They had all the cops, all the guns. The citizens were pretty much harmless here. And we had, they even injected junk bond. I thought of you. They injected these little they looked like grubs into everybody's neck so they could be controlled. And I whispered over to my friend Rosie, I said, this stuff's for real. My friend told me they have this stuff, they inject nanotechnology that changes your DNA. You need to listen to Greg Carpenter sometime. And when you and I were in Virginia, we were actually talking about this.
That's right.
So anyway, the government became completely subjugated and became co-conspirators, collaborators with the invading forces. In fact, you saw very little of the invading forces. Those that were completely in charge were now the government and their police forces. And you had the media that was complicit. Art imitating life? I think so. And they flipped through a newspaper and you saw one headline that jumped out at me that I saw, and there was, "Why we are lucky they chose us." This is like I was saying, I have visited so many of the quote Civil War, as we know it wasn't a Civil War, sites, but in Virginia, we're seeing now, for instance, with them taking down the statues and renaming Robert E. Lee schools. I said, what are they going to do next? Celebrate Appomattox Day out here? But this is what happened in the movie. They became so subjugated. They cheered on their, the invaders, and then had massive surveillance. They showed facial recognition software in the works, highlighting people's faces. We've talked about all that. Listening devices. We talked about the listening devices in France. We've talked about the facial recognition software. I saw another one. People are still doing this on Facebook. They still haven't woken up. They have these fun little questionnaires. Answer this and then cut and paste on your own. It'll be fun. Do you have piercings? How many times have you been married? Do you have kids? Do you have tattoos? You're giving these people means by which to identify yourself. You're making up your own dossier on Facebook. People, just stop it. A while back, I came across this article. I hope you got a chance to see it, Junk Bond. San Diego has been turned into a massive Chinese-style public surveillance network. We talked about social credits. We talked about all this stuff that was happening in China. But looky here. Here's what an article, it's on offnow.org. And they said they start the article by asking, can you imagine a city in the United States secretly creating a Chinese-style public surveillance network that can identify everyone? Can you imagine that same city secretly creating a Chinese-style public watch listing network? Imagine no more, because it's already happened. Apparently this author wrote about covert facial recognition streetlights coming to a city near you. That's another article that it's linked to this. We'll post this article up on our CRN page later, Jeff.
Already at several cities around the country, by the way.
Yeah, well, now they're doing this also at the airports too. Facial recognition software. I think in San Jose Airport, when I was there last year, I saw when you go into the garages where they have that kiosk where you get your tickets, cameras everywhere. You would think you were in a film production studio. They're all over the place. They're getting your license plates front and rear. They're getting your face, your passengers' faces everywhere. As you check in, they can see in your car and the people in it. So he says here, he had a recent article in the San Diego Reader reveals how a hacker discovered emails between the Port of San Diego and BriefCam. The emails revealed that law enforcement is secretly using a network of 400 facial recognition surveillance cameras to identify everyone. They announced a breakthrough here in real-time recognition surveillance. Here's a quote: robust multi-camera search capabilities identify men, women, children, and vehicles with speed and precision using 25 classes and attributes: face recognition, appearance similarity, color, size, speed, path, direction, and dwell time. Yay. Junk Bond, what does this mean?
It means that they have a pretty doggone good way of catching your face. If you remain in a position for any limited amount of time, they'll be able to get the picture of your face. Now, for us, now this information um, that it was going to happen first came out last September, right? I think that's when the when it broke that they were going to use it. It's already in use in Hartsfield Jackson Airport in Atlanta, Chicago O'Hare, Dulles, LaGuardia, and several other major airports around this union. It's in use in India, in most of the airports there. It's in use in the UK. Interestingly enough, it is not in use from last that I heard, unless somebody else knows something more recent. It is not in use in Israel, of all the places you would think, because of uh, the high level of security that the Israelis maintain at their airports. Uh, you would expect something like this to be at use there, but it's not. They still use the good old face to face, like, hey, that guy is the bad guy that I saw. This guy's behavior is different. They're not capturing everybody's picture. They're not capturing all of the demographics that go along with that either. So, I mean, when you go into Houston, like you said, San Jose, let me think, Miami, San Diego, JFK, Orlando. I mean, there are so many places that it's already up and it's being used everywhere. And they're looking to implement them in all of the kiosks. You know how you can go to the kiosk now and get your boarding pass printed out. You go in, you put your credit card in, or you type in your number, your frequent flyer number, and you stand in front of the kiosk waiting for your boarding pass to print out. Well, there's a reason why it takes you through so many screens. There's a reason why it takes uh, a substantial amount of time to be able to get the boarding pass at the end of the process. And that is, it goes back to what you call the dwelling time.
Mm.
They have your face in a rather locked position for a certain amount of time. So they get your picture, and that's locked in with that boarding pass now.
If
That's
you
kind of
think
how
about
that
it, how
works.
many of those questions could they put on one screen that you could just answer? It's like clickbait. And now I see why they're doing it, the dwell time, so they can gather up these features. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and it's been it's a feature of why the kiosks were developed in the manner that they were in the first place. So you're not going to ever see it where the all of the questions are actually put into one screen. That cuts down the dwell time that you have at the screen. On the other hand, as the technology gets better, they'll be able to get a much cleaner, crisper picture of you at the kiosk in a shorter amount of time. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will put them all on one screen, and then it'll come out as a new feature saying, "Hey, we've made this so much better for you."
We
Right?
can capture your features even faster so you can proceed on more quickly to your TSA sponsored growth. Well,
Right.
here's yeah, go
So there's even more here. So a couple of years ago, TSA uh, posted, not very broadly or widely noticed, was that they will be cutting through all of your social media posts and using that to help them identify whether or not you are whether you're a threat to get on a plane or not.
Our
This
listener
is
our listener Jeff is chiming in and saying, "Yet another reason in my list not to fly, nor do I take interstate highways." That's a concern as well, interstate highways. I like to travel in my RV frequently, and also I use a major interstate thoroughfare here, Interstate 80, which is a main thoroughfare for a lot of the drugs going back and forth.
what is the purpose of the interstates?
What? To get
What
military
It's
transported.
right. It's part of the national defense system. The highway and people from the 50s, you'll remember this. This was the Eisenhower interstate system. This was to be able to move military troops and equipment back and forth transcontinentally. You like that word? Transcontinentally as quickly as possible to defend the shores of these here United States. It has been taken and some people that I know have argued that it was put in place intentionally to help remove the small town aspect, like the construction of Levittown at the same time, the first organized residential suburban community. The reorganization of how we lived started back in the 50s when these interstates were put in. It got rid of how many mom and pop shops were destroyed along the way, how many went bankrupt because the highway system was completely rendered useless and pretty much not needed. I mean, it was just not needed because these super highways were put in place with the understanding that during a national emergency, sometime they'd be used for military purposes and you wouldn't use them. Well, doggone it. What have we done? We've taken that and we've turned it into our own thoroughfare for going back and forth, traveling vast distances, even just to use them to get to work now. It's completely changed the aspect of who we are in the States here. And again, coupling that with the suburban community and the rezoning of towns into business, commercial and residential, you've taken all the little businesses out of the towns. You put the towns in one location and you put the little businesses in another location, making it the perfect storm for all of these gigantic corporations to come in and set up because they're the only ones that can sustain something like that. Take 7-Eleven, for example, right? How many mom and pop coffee shops have gone out of business because the 7-Eleven came into town? And so, I mean, I could go on all day, but anyway, I'm off topic. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Suzanne.
That's okay. But it's absolutely true. And what we see is when we are more or less funneled into using these thoroughfares. Now we talk about funneling also for security and defense. We want to funnel the enemy so they're easy to vanquish. Well, we as citizens are funneled into and have to use these interstates, and then we've got the state troopers out there with the radar detectors, and if you fail to use a turn signal or whatever reason they can get you to pull over, then they're going to start prodding you and try and get information so they can get the dog out and search for vehicles. And I even saw a story, this was I believe on Interstate 70, a Marine police officer, a military police officer in the Marine Corps. He was pulled over with his wife and they were subjected to a full search. Dogs came out And the cops even admitted, we know you don't have any guns. We're just or not guns, but drugs. We're just trying to look for money and other ways to get the assets. So anyway, we see that. Let me go back to this article though, because with regards to the surveillance state here, we assume that we're going to have this happen to us when we go to airports. We know there's no reasonable expectation of privacy at an airport. We know there's no
You've been conditioned. Everybody's been conditioned to accept it now
yeah,
because of the heightened state of security that we have to maintain in order to stay safe.
exactly. I want somebody to keep me safe from these goons in the TSA and the DHS. That's what I want. But again, assuming that we have found this acceptable, what we have not bargained for was this TSA style surveillance on our public streets. Again, these major cities where, like you mentioned, because of this interstate highway system, many people are corralled into living. And here is GE. I think that company is just pure evil. But this article says here in 2017, civil rights advocates sent a letter to the mayor and city council of San Diego asking the city not to install GE streetlights. They asked, devices capable of monitoring and recording residents invade privacy, chill free speech, and disparately impact communities of color. Again, this is all predicated on the desire to solve crimes easily with a minimum of police work and a huge sacrifice on our even perception of freedom. I mean, we are so conditioned to seeing cameras everywhere we go. Now, listening devices, as we've talked about, placed wherever we go as well. I think it is entirely within the realm of reality to assume that social credits are being issued based on what we're saying, where we're going. We discussed this before with metadata. So, this is yeah.
So that's how that's kind of how it works here. So understand that these cameras are also in use in many, not just the airports and uh, boat terminals and places like that, but they're also in use throughout cities. There's a software package that I saw one time that the show Person of Interest, where they have this all this Internet of Things all connected together, and they can identify where somebody is at almost any point in time. I got to see a software from a private company that collected data that did this stuff in almost in near real time, almost in the same way that they were able to do it in that show Person of Interest. And I sat there, my jaw hit the ground, thinking like, "Oh my God, we are there. We are to the point where we're going to completely destroy ourselves." You
Yeah,
know,
there's there's
all of the Project Green lights that transmit in Detroit, they're the ones that transmit police live surveillance footage from businesses in high crime areas all throughout Detroit,
we
and
like
they're the Project Green lights.
there's a show on my kid was watching Caught on Camera, and it shows, I believe it's in the UK, these massive surveillance systems, and then you've got the cops in this big control center, and they can track where everybody is, and they show how they get criminals and a lot of drunks out there at night, and catching everybody doing minor infractions, and boom, they send the cops out there. Somebody urinates in the street, cops with guns show up, and off they get carted out of town limits. Anyway, this surveillance state is it's here to stay, and get used to it.
We have we already have a social credit type of a system, as you were saying.
Yeah.
You're already there. Your records kept at DHS, at TSA. They don't just throw that stuff away. That information's kept. It may not be a specific score that you get back, like you ask, you beg, please, Experian, please, may I please see my credit score so I know if I suck or if I don't suck, right? Will people like me? Well, same thing here with TSA and DHS. Please tell me what my score is so I'm allowed to travel from here to there. It's a standard process in government, specifically in intelligence circles, to consistently deny, and this is the pattern. There's 4 steps to it: deny, 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 counter accuse. So here we go.
Yeah.
The U.S. is not doing it. The U.S. is not doing it. The U.S. is not doing it, but China's doing it.
Yeah. And Google would work with China to censor searches and information, but they would never do that here. And
Wouldn't do it here. No
comforted
way.
knowing that.
Oh, what was that release just the other day about Google? Oh, they are doing it.
Yeah, never mind. Never mind. There was another article I wanted to share about that also with YouTube, that they are taking away all videos that they say have to do with conspiracy theories. I think,
Right.
what is a conspiracy theory and how many times have they proven to not be conspiracy theory, but factual stories that actually look bad for Big Brother? You want to run with that one? And I'm going to dig up this story here.
Yeah, sure. It's a conspiracy theory is a term that was made great by the CIA when they
Oh,
were,
the CIA guys.
hey. It came about before the CIA, around the turn of the century. The term was used a few times, and then during the Kennedy administration, after the assassination, somebody found the term again and say, "Hey, this would be a great idea if we use this to cover up what really happened during the Kennedy assassination." So I believe that all of the data, like the Kennedy assassination witness database, will probably there's a couple of videos about the people in that. I'm sure that will be removed from YouTube, even though the database covers the 200 and I think 267 witnesses that died within the first 3 years of Kennedy's assassination. The key witnesses who all died. Um, Statistically, trying to figure out if that was possible, um, that number would just be an insane number. That 267 people, all associated with one specific uh, event in history, died, most of unnatural causes. A couple of them are even identified as having been killed by CIA assassins in the database, and is verified by the CIA that they did that. It it boggles the mind, but anyway, something like that will probably be removed. The fact that Sirhan did not shoot and kill Bobby Kennedy, right? He would have had to have been in front of him, and he wasn't in front of him. He was behind him, and Bobby Kennedy was shot 4 times in front, and 5 other people were shot. And Sirhan had a revolver that held 8 shots. So already you're counting 9 bullets, and okay, an 8 bullet revolver. Um, and he was behind Kennedy, and Kennedy was shot in the front. So how does something like this stay on YouTube? How do these types of videos stay on YouTube? I don't know. I really don't know. The fact that Martin Luther King Jr., right, his assassinate, whose name just escapes me real quick for the moment. Um, it came out that he was actually exonerated, that he did not shoot Martin Luther King Jr. It was a wrong caliber rifle that they found him with. Just basic stuff like that. I'm sure that will be wiped off of YouTube also. But I don't know where they would draw the line and what they would say is real.
Well, and
Even
that's a
simple stuff that, like, John McCain is a war hero. How would you be able to justify that? Right? He survived living in the Hanoi Hilton under preferential treatment. They brought him in, they took care of his wounds, they treated him very well. Um, he made a video that aided and abetted the enemy. All of these things line up as treasonous and violation of the code of conduct. So, how does that generate war hero at the end of it? But I'm sure that type of stuff, again, it's where do you draw the line?
Yeah, here's I want to. I'm as we're talking, I'm putting up these articles on my Twitter, Cowgirl Esquire, and I am linking it. I'm putting the link for CRN on there so we can get those, and we'll put those up on our pages as well. I can't do it because I'm still, I have 9 days of hard time left in the Facebook penitentiary. But let me wrap up this hour.
You hardened criminal, you.
I know I'm a recidivist, repeat offender here. But YouTube, this is an article, newspunch.com. And again, I put this on Twitter, has announced plans to permanently blacklist all videos it deems conspiratorial. for its platform. The platform has finally caved into pressure from far-left journalists who have been aggressively lobbying for the company to ban content creators and videos that go against the mainstream narrative. This
Bum,
has
bum,
been the great
bum.
thing about these alternative forms of media, where people like us who aren't interested in the government talking points, mainstream media, the education uh, industry talking points, have a voice. Well, now they're going to silence us. And we know that. We're already seeing this. We're going to get into a little bit more. Amazon announced they're going to take off books from their selection for alternative treatments to autism and what they consider to be anti-vaccination books. Again, this is more government indoctrination. These tech industries are locked at the hip with big government, big pharmaceutical, the banking industry. This is just as
Where they
dirty.
get their kickbacks from. Think about it. Jeff Bezos didn't pay any taxes, right? Why didn't he pay any taxes? Because he's doing what Big Brother wants him to do.
Exactly. And we saw that movie, The Creepy Line, shows exactly the link. I mean, the government uses Google with all of their documents. They're not going to make Google upset. They're going to want to play these games. But they say here, anybody who's they talk about the rabbit hole, you get into these little YouTube things and it leads you one to another with these videos. The recommendations all serve up to what is an unsavory content. Ludicrous conspiracy theories about mass shooting events being staged, far-fetched proclamations that the moon landing never happened, harebrained notions that the earth that we live in is flat. You know what? Let these theories live or die on their own. Let people make their own judgments and conclusions based on more information, not less information. Here's a quote here YouTube said in a blog post: "We'll continue that work this year, including taking a closer look at how we can reduce the spread of content that comes to, but doesn't quite cross the line of violating our community guidelines." As we know, there are no hard
Community guidelines.
exactly. It's whatever some little goon sitting in a cubicle. We talked about this with Facebook. They have contracted out community guideline little drones for $16 an hour, while the Facebook employees make about 280 grand a year. These guys make about 28,000, and they are determining whose word, whose message is heard and whose isn't. Jeff, let me know when we're coming up to a hard break. I know we're getting there in 3 minutes. So, this is what is happening. This is how a lot of us are getting our information. And YouTube, these tech giants who say this is a free market, we're going to get into that in the next hour of the show. Ask yourself, are we not deserving of fair and equal treatment? Because people will say, well, it's a free service. This is what you could expect from a free service, or go out and create your own platform. This is a company that is not linked with the government. It's a private company. Well, we've already proven it is linked at the hip with the government. And is it a free service? We have spent weeks and the first hour of the show, really probably 30 minutes today, talking about the information we give up by participating in this electronic town square of the 21st century. We might not have paid money, but we've sold our souls. They know everything about us. They know our habits. They know our patterns. They know who is in our family. They know our vices. They know our dirty little secrets. They know where we go. We have had quid pro quo with these guys. Just because we haven't paid in money in many instances doesn't mean we haven't paid. We're going to take a hard break here and then come back in the next hour with more on the Electoral College. We're going to finish up with some of the big tech issues and talk about some gun control and federalism. We'll be right back. This is the Cerberus Radio Network.
Before we go, because we have a minute. So,
okay.
So I'm not going to be able to watch my video about Cheney running up and down the Twin Towers, setting the charges personally. I mean, come on, that's just not right.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I mean, isn't there something you'd rather be doing, like sucking up some mindless video?
Well,
I mean that's obviously important content there.
Oh, it kind of fits.
I always feel a little disturbed when uh, people want to remove your ability to decide what content is good and what content is bad before you have the opportunity to review something. They want to make that decision for you because, that's I don't know, that's who they are. That's how they control things or whatever it is. I don't know, but I do know that once you start removing people's ability to make the decisions on their own about what they do, what they see, what they say, you've really crossed that line, and it's really downhill fast from there.
All right. So it's break time. We used up that minute. All right.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
Citizens, soldiers, I am here at the order of General Robert E. Lee, commanding all Virginia forces. On April 15th of this year of our Lord, 1861, Simon Cameron, the Secretary of War of the United States, sent a telegram to our governor, John Letcher, directing him to raise 3 regiments of infantry to be sent to assist in suppressing the Southern Confederacy. Governor Letcher's answer is well known to you, but perhaps not his words. This is why out of Washington stated, "You have chosen to inaugurate civil war. And having done so, we will meet you in a spirit as determined as the Lincoln administration has exhibited toward the South." 2 days later, the Virginia legislature voted for secession. Just as we would not send any of our soldiers to march in other states and tyrannize other people, so will we never allow the armies of others to march into our state and tyrannize our people. Like many of you, indeed most of you, I've always been a Union man. It is not with joy or with a light heart that many of us have welcomed secession. Had our neighbors to the north practiced a less bellicose form of persuasion, perhaps this day might not have come, but that day has been thrust upon us like it was thrust upon our ancestors. The Lincoln administration required us to raise 3 regiments. Tell them we have done so.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
I love it. Jeff, the music is rocking, my friend. Thank you so much for that. Folks, welcome back. This is hour number dos of the Cerberus Radio Networks. Waking up, Cerberus. Good morning, Cerberus. God loves you, Cerberus. Keep talking and chatting my ear off. We have Suzanne Sherman in the hinterlands of Utah, and we have Dr. Professor Jeff, I got that, Johnson, up in the mountains of Pennsylvania somewhere at his hideaway underground bungalow, producing and producing and producing. Suzanne?
Yes, everybody, welcome back to the second hour of Waking Up Cerberus. Suzanne
Give them the website. Give them the website.
SuzanneCSherman.com. And you can also follow Cerberus Radio Network on Facebook, facebook.com, Cerberus Radio Network. CRN is our fan page. Also, we have a YouTube page. Thank you for those of us joining in the chat. Jeff, if anybody has anything that you want to share with us, just let us know. Also, SoundCloud, you can download any of our shows on there. We have some great stuff, fantastic content. I'm really proud of what we do here. Please tell your friends, share, Download the shows, subscribe, follow us on SoundCloud and YouTube as well. We can't make this work if we don't have our listeners. We have some that are so evangelical. Big, hat tip to them. But again, as we've been explaining in the last hour and on our other shows, the tech giants do not like what we have to say. The tech giants march in goose step with this illegitimate government we have, both at the local and the national, pardon my French, levels. We've talked about the textilizer.
Break it real quick.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, because we're getting away from the intro, and I want to touch on something with Greg, because Greg, what will our website domain be? Because it's under construction, and I think people need to know this because we are moving ahead with this. So, what will it be? It's not there yet, folks, but it's going to be.
Well, once I flip the switch on it, is that what you're talking about?
Right. What is it going to be? What is our domain name, and where will people find it in the future when you flip the switch?
It's going to be Cerberus.radio.
Cerberus.radio. So, folks, we are growing. We are changing things. We're looking at some new technology to purchase that hopefully will get us back into the live phone-in show business. We are investing a lot of time and effort into this, and I hope you guys all know that we're doing it for you, because this is all a labor of love, because no one here is making any money at this. So I just wanted you to know that we are moving ahead. There will be a website. Yeah,
don't look for it now. It won't show up. Don't waste
it won't show up.
Time with the search engine. You're going to get something that says, have a nice day. You're obviously looking for something that doesn't exist. Would you like to seek psychiatric help? And,
yeah.
Well, we've got it right here.
Oh, I sleep like a baby. I have no problems.
You wake up every 20 minutes, tossing and turning, wanting the bottle. I know.
I wanted to get into this. Have you guys seen this story? If you have any doubt about how creepy these people are in the tech industry, I mean, I grew up in Silicon Valley. When I go there and visit family, I just get creeped out by these folks. I really do. Forget the fact that they're hardcore Marxists. It's just the fact that they have absolutely no respect for our rights to be left alone. Just modern human decency is the issue in this story here. It's out of USA Today. Facebook, you know how they do these surveys once in a while? They're actually under fire because they asked. Now, mind you, I have been banned for explaining the goal of Islam to take over certain other areas that are unconquered. We discussed that earlier in the show. Judge Janine, what's her name? I don't know her last name, but she is censored on Fox for saying that Sharia law is incompatible with our Constitution. You know what? Our good old Republicans are also incompatible with our Constitution, but I digress. But let me get back to, we talked about that movie, The Creepy Line. This is creepy Facebook here. They asked users whether pedophiles should be able to proposition underage girls for sexually explicit photographs. This is the Facebook that has community standards that want you to feel safe, that encourage you to contact them if somebody's making you feel unsafe, if you need to report them. But the survey is the latest in a series of missteps, the article says, which has been criticized for allowing content that exploits children. Okay, folks, let's have a reality check here. We know how the hardcore left feels about children. You can murder them up till the day they're born. You can take an 11-year-old boy, put him in drag, take him to a gay bar, have gay adult men give the kid dollar bills. CPS investigates that's not child abuse. Facebook cheers it on. The social media giants thinks this is just fantastic. All the while saying they want a safe community. Facebook scrapped the survey, this article says, that posed questions about teens being groomed by older men after after it was spotted by media outlets in the UK. It now says the survey could have been better designed. The company routinely uses surveys to get feedback from the social network's more than 2 billion users. They've been relying on surveys, beg your pardon, to take their pulse on everything from the fake news epidemic to whether Facebook makes them happy as people have stopped spending as much time there. Well, gee, why do you think that is? They're not even treating us like customers because we're not customers. We are their product. And when they see that a product might be detrimental to their goals, they just silence us. We've seen that as well. I'll get into that. Donald Trump is calling for an investigation against them. Here's a quote from Facebook, in thinking about an ideal world where you could set Facebook's policies, how would you handle the following? A private message in which an adult man asks a 14-year-old girl for sexual pictures. Sexual content with minors online is part of a grooming process in which adults seek to gain trust and lower inhibition. It's often a precursor to sexual abuse. Now, when I was practicing law in the 1990s, we actually had some cases where adults were seeking the, let's say, affections of minor children. This was prosecuted. Facebook wants to know if we're okay with this. Another question asked, who should decide whether an adult man can ask for sexual pictures on Facebook, with options ranging from Facebook users decide the rules by voting and tell Facebook to Facebook decides the rules on its own. Gary Rosen, vice president of product at Facebook, said that was a mistake. We run surveys to understand how the community thinks about how we set policies, but this kind of activity is and always will be completely unacceptable on Facebook. We regularly work with authorities if identified. It shouldn't have been part of the survey. First of all, the fact that they would even consider this remotely acceptable says a lot about these individuals over in Silicon Valley. The other thing I noted, and Junk Bond, I think you're going to agree with me on this. I think that until they were called out, and I think Facebook's falling on the sword for this because they don't want to reveal the real intent of this. My opinion is that this is just aiding law enforcement. Again, we're going to work with the government, work with law enforcement, work with the police state at the expense of their product. That would be us. Now, granted, if you're sick enough to engage in this kind of behavior, you deserve what you have coming. But, is this really that Facebook finds this acceptable, or did they just get busted working with the cops? What do you think, guys? I don't think their intentions are in any way benevolent either way.
They got busted.
They got busted. Yeah.
Yeah. They got busted. So let me take it back a step just for a second here, if I could. Most people know what DARPA is, right? That's the Defense Advanced Research Projects Activity. It's a branch of the Department of Defense. They started a program a number of years ago called LifeLog. And I wouldn't bring this up other than any other general conversation activity. It's not a general conversation thing. This is very specific and very interesting how this all went down. Now, people generally know what life logging is. It takes and it collects digital data from a person's full life. You collect pictures, emotions, like Suzanne's talking about, how they feel at a certain moment, what makes them tick, what turns them off. All this information is cataloged. Early 80s, mid 80s, through the 90s, into 2000s. For the millennials out there, there was a decade called the 80s. We'll get into that a different day. Don't worry about it. But it'll take all of this information and track through and develop a timeline of a person's life. So at a future event, if something happens, if some traumatic event happens, you can get a reasonable expectation of how that person would act and or react in that situation. For example, if you had collected everything about someone and you knew how they behaved, how they acted in during traumatic events, during exciting events, like a birthday or something like that, you would have known on 9/11 if that person was at ground zero how they would have behaved. Would they become part of the crew that would search for people? Would they run away screaming? Would they sit in place and just have perished? You would have known what they were going to do and how they would have acted and reacted on that day. Well, this program was considered way too intrusive. As a matter of fact, the privacy concerns of the program were so tremendous that it was shut down. And when was the program shut down? It was shut down in January 2004. 2 weeks, 2 weeks before Facebook became active in February 2004. Now, I'm not drawing any conclusive lines to anything. I'm merely bringing up the point that Zuckerberg and all his buddies who worked at a highfalutin college that has massive, massive amounts of DoD contracts. Okay, don't think for a second that Harvard doesn't have Defense Department contracts and MIT don't have Department contracts. They have huge amount of monies flowing in from the Defense Department to create and build things. Don't think for a minute that it is outside the possibility that these guys were developing something on behalf of DARPA, whereas the forward facing or the public view of what it could do, right, was too offensive, and thereby forcing the Defense Department to, quote, shut it down and have a private entity stand it up. It's not beyond the realm of the possible. I don't have hard proof that that's exactly what happened, but 2 weeks after the Defense Department shuts down the program that says this is what we can do because we have all of the technology in place now, and we're going to just, we're just going to shit can all that. And 2 weeks later, here's a public offering from a company that can do exactly the same thing. Stupidity abounds.
As we see now, I'm going to kind of segue into this increase in gun control. As we know, we have the tragedy in New Zealand. And I think over there, the government has not only made it a criminal offense to have any of the videos of that event in your possession, but now they're going to ban the AR-15. And with the House being taken over by the Democrats, we've seen them start to double down on gun control. And that was immediately when the election results came in November. And as we've discussed, we've seen the bump stock ban. We've seen the the extreme risk protection orders, otherwise known as the red flag laws. Donald Trump told Dianne Feinstein he would be willing to discuss an AR-15 ban or the assault weapons ban. And we see very little truth and facts in this campaign to ban the AR-15. And again, the reason they think they can get away with this is the Supreme Court, the black robed messiahs, Justice Antonin Scalia, by the way, and Heller, said that the Second Amendment only protects handguns. Well, he didn't say only protects handguns. He said, what does the Second Amendment protect? And then by choosing to say it protects the handguns, by implication, the feds can constitutionally regulate other firearms, such as the AR-15, which is now the left's boogeyman. We're also seeing, I'm going to bring this up, an article about how they want to have background checks for people purchasing ammunition. There's an article in the Federalist that just came out not too long ago, March 18th, that says that the gun control campaign against the AR-15 is full of lies. And we see when we have a lot of these politicians that are being interviewed, they don't even know how the guns function. One gal, legislator from Colorado, said they wanted to ban all magazines with over, 10 or 20 round capacities. And they said, what are you going to do with the ones that are already owned in your state if you want people to get rid of them? Well, once they're used, they get thrown away. No, sweetheart, it's a different kind of magazine that you use and you throw away. It's the paper magazine that you read, then you throw away or recycle, whatever you into. But you heard the word magazine and figured it was disposable, just like the other ones. I saw another one who couldn't describe what the muzzle shroud was. She somehow thought that increased the performance of the firearm. The evil features that are used to distinguish an AR-15 and turn it into a military weapon, which really, as we know, is completely nonsensical. But here
we got to see, Suzanne, we got to ban it so we know what we're safe from.
Yes, exactly. But here's how this article starts out. The conflict over the Second Amendment, an attempt to remove firearm rights, will ultimately result in a civil war and will eventually balkanize the U.S. along political, cultural, and most importantly, racial lines, wrote the Christchurch, New Zealand mass murderer in his demented manifesto. Some Americans, unfortunately, immediately use the bloodbath to support their political causes. It's okay when the left does it, but don't you dare question Benghazi. Then you're politicizing a tragedy. So what we're seeing here now is, again, the political knee-jerk response to the acts of a maniac. We saw that with the Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina in Charleston. Immediately, they went on a wholesale attack on all Southern heritage because this idiot had the Virginia battle flag. There were also pictures with him with the stars and stripes, I believe, but nobody ever saw that. So we have this disingenuous campaign.
That's not a slave flag.
Right.
Not in the same way that the stars and bars were. Okay. So
yeah. So we have here Senator Chris Murphy is wondering why Americans needed semi-automatic rifles at all. Nobody needs an AR-15 to hunt. Actually, I get jackrabbits with the one I used to have. I went boating, and you know what happens when you go boating, they all just end up going in the bottom of the lake. Anyway, Connecticut senator tweeted this: nobody needs a semi-automatic rifle to defend their home. Actually, on our old network, I did a show about the AR-15, and not only is it appropriate to use as a home defense mechanism firearm, it's an optimal one. You have better control of your aim because of the longer barrel than you would with just a pistol. Some people think that a shotgun is the ultimate home defense weapon. Sure it is, but what if...
I think a Claymore mine is myself.
Well, that's for perimeter. We all have those.
Oh, no, that's for the front door, sweetheart.
Oh, okay. What if somebody has one of your family members? Are you going to open up with your 12-gauge double-aught buck and take them both out? No.
308.
Yeah.
308 through the sinuses.
And that's the thing. The AR-15, I think that's like the M14, which is the 308. The M16 is the 308 round. The AR-15 is more a 223. And that's more for hunting jackrabbits. I had a friend of mine that was a defense contractor that said, he said the difference between the AR-15 and the AR-10, which is the 308 round, is the AR-15 will put a hole in your head. The AR-10 will take your head off. So choose your problem-solving tools. I recommend everybody have whatever tools you need and are comfortable.
Well, that's a good point, because they are tools. The misuse of a tool is up to an individual. The correct and proper use of a tool is also up to an individual. I put before you, Suzanne Sherman, I place before you the U.S. Constitution. That is a tool. It is used for a framework of government. Used correctly, it might have some good to it. Used incorrectly, it's bad. So the question becomes, do we ban all tools that are used incorrectly, or do we talk to stupid people and try to educate them on how to use the tools correctly?
Speaking of stupid people, Beto O'Rourke had some choice words about the AR-15. We allow people to buy weapons that were designed, engineered, and sold to the United States military for the expressed purpose of killing people as effectively as possible and as great a number as possible.
An AR-15?
An AR-15, did you know that was a military weapon?
You go to battle with an AR-15, you're going to have your
You die.
different parts of your body handed back to you in a bag. Yeah, that's ridiculous. How much? I have to ask: was this CIA provided crack that he's smoking, or was this like straight from regular drug lords?
Oh my
Because
God.
the CIA stuff is much better.
Let me find, where did I put this article now? I just had it up here, but I have all these windows open. So yeah, Beto O'Rourke is all of a sudden now a firearms expert, and he is going back and just it's the same step. These are high power militarized weapons. I want to refer people to my article, muskets to AR-15s. Are these weapons of war or weapons of tyranny? Again, even if they were the exact same thing as the military weapons, that was the purpose of and intent of the Second Amendment, to keep the militia, every able-bodied person, able to defend themselves from personal assault or from a tyrannical government. Here are more words of wisdom from this idiot. An AR-15 gunshot wound, that high-impact, high-velocity round will blow a hole through your back the size of an orange. You will bleed to death before anyone can get to you to save your life, because that's exactly what it was designed to do, to keep the enemy's soldier down and not claim the life of one of our own. If you own
the size of an orange,
the size of an orange, itty bitty round is going to have a wound the size of an orange. But here's the thing.
Well, the M4, the round will tumble. In the AR-15, it doesn't tumble like that. That's the difference. The 223, it's a 5.56 NATO round, but it's smaller. And in the M4 and the M16, the original version, it was designed to tumble in such a way that it would ricochet off of a bone or something and go back through the body somewhere else to tear up soft tissue. In the AR-15, that doesn't happen. The velocity of the bullet is much slower. It's a much different type of a round that's used in order that's projected. It doesn't tumble the same way. So it's not going to, you have a small hole going in with the M16 and the M4, and you have a big hole out the back. But with the AR-15, you have a small hole going in and a little bit bigger out the back, because it doesn't break apart like you would have with a hollow point tip, right? If you have a 357 hollow point, okay, that's going to have it'll have a substantial hole going in, but out the back, you'd be missing your back. If that thing hits you in the chest, your back would be gone, because the hollow point, it breaks apart like that and it tears everything out with it. The AR-15 doesn't do that. That's not the way the round is designed for that. This is insane. Again, I have to ask, where does he get his crack? Is it from the CIA? Because this is good stuff he's putting out there. This is good propaganda.
What boggles my mind is what's really scary, and what should keep people scared, is the adoration you see people giving him at these speaking events. One guy posted a picture and it said, "I wish my wife looked at me like she looks at Beto. Oh, by the way, that woman in the picture is my wife." When they have this hero,
what an idiot!
Yeah, this hero, both the wife, all three of them,
and the husband. When
you have this mentality of the cult of personality worship, we don't care about the facts. That's precisely what is happening. They don't care that he has no clue what he's talking about. And here's what he says. Do you remember the words, "If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor"? Oh, here's what he's saying now. If you own an AR-15, keep it. Continue to use it responsibly and safely. I just don't think we need to sell any more weapons of war into this public. Screw you, Beto, you freaking liar. If you own an AR, you can keep it. Meanwhile, we're gonna have background checks. We're gonna have mandatory insurance. We're gonna have mandatory, and this is exactly how we're getting the gun registration. By the way, every time you go out and buy ammo, if you buy some 223 rounds, they're gonna know what you have. This is how they know what you have, by having proposed ammo checks across the board at a national level. And I'm going to get to that.
You sound rather passionate about this.
Oh my gosh.
So I have to ask the obvious question here, because this is just way too hypocritical, as Bugs Bunny would say. When when I have an instrument of war, such as my AR-15 in my hand, right, and I'll blow a hole in a human that is bigger than any hole that's ever been blown in any living animal before, why is it only a human that has this huge hole blown in them? When I use an AR-15 to go hunting, if I used a rifle that would blow holes in my dinner, I wouldn't have dinner. There would be no animal left. I would contaminate all the meat with the lead from the bullet. If I had an AR-15 that tears big holes in people, why doesn't it do the same thing when I shoot an animal with it? What's so special about a human that the bullet reacts differently when it hits a human than when it does when it hits an animal? I can shoot a deer in my yard with my AR-15, okay? And I'll put a little bullet in the front, and maybe the bullet will come out the back, hopefully. That would be nice. But it doesn't blow a hole the size of the Grand Canyon through the deer. And why is that? Like I said before, they're not designed to do that type of stuff. That's not what they're here to do.
I wouldn't even hunt deer with an AR-15. I think the biggest thing that I've shot with one is a jackrabbit. And even then, sometimes it took more than one shot.
They're a great coyote gun.
Yeah.
They shoot a long
yeah.
way. They're great for a little bit of predator. So if you want to do some coyote, or if you're doing a bobcat,
Liberal Democrat or something,
they're just an awesome.
Oh, there's our ban. Oh, there we go.
He gone.
There's actually a picture on this article that I've been reading from Town Hall of them holding up a picture that says, "This is the size of a hole made by an AR-15. Tell me again why you need that." And this is big black blob on a poster board that some idiot woman's holding. And then there's a kid holding a little piece of Target paper that has all these little tiny holes in it. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That's your hole from the AR-15. And there are about 30 of them on this little image. All of them maybe 1/8 of an inch or so in diameter.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we have all this lying, all this hyperbole, we talked about getting people's emotions riled up at the beginning of this show. You see mine getting riled up over this subject. Well, the other side is getting just as riled up. This is why we have talk about a civil war. Guns.com has another article out. Democrats debut national ammo control bill in Congress. Remember, the Second Amendment only protects certain guns. It doesn't keep Congress off our backs, apparently. An effort to close what bill supporters term the ammo loophole. They make this crap up. Would make mandatory background checks the nationwide, pardon my French, norm for ammunition sales. So every time I want to go skeet shooting, I want to shoot trap in my backyard, clay pigeons, I've got to go through a background check. Is this going to be an annual background check, or every single time I want to go and get some ammo, do I have to go through a new check, just like I have to do if I want to buy a new firearm? Oh, wait till those social credits kick in. What's going to happen? So we have forced states that do require them, Connecticut, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. I believe they tried to do that in California. Initiatives, enacted in California 2016, New York in 2013, are closer to a proposed new plan requiring them at purchase, but each has troubled track record of getting that passed. But again, folks, they're not going to get us by an outright nationwide background check or a gun ban, at least not at this point. They are
not in Missouri either.
Wait,
right? Not in Missouri.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to get into that one also. But this is how they get us. Well, you have your guns. You can have your guns. You just can't put any rounds in them. And by the way, it will be a federal felony if you have a transfer of ammo without an FFL dealer involved. I think they're going that way. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? Time marches on, and so does progressivism. They're absolutely going that way. I want to talk about the good news, though. Can we talk about the good news that's coming with this?
Yeah. Missouri,
because, Missouri. So they have two aspects of happiness, which is just freaking amazing to me. I love this. They're taking a cue from the marijuana industry or the cannabis industry, and they're saying, okay, we're not enforcing any federal, quote, gun laws here in Missouri, number one. Number two, it's going to be a crime for you to actually try to enforce one of those, quote, federal laws here in Missouri. And the second part of this, which is just awesome, is that this bill would require AR-15 ownership.
That's a different bill. That's a different bill.
I'm sorry, different bill?
Yeah.
Okay. But it's another aspect of where they're going in Missouri, right?
That's the McDaniels Militia Act, the one you're talking about, the AR-15. And he doesn't think there's much of a chance it's going to pass. But that's what it is.
The fact that it's actually getting up there and getting visualization is something that is being looked at, especially over across the river in Iowa. I know there's no river between Missouri and Iowa, but don't start sending me hate mail. Okay. In Des Moines, though, there is a lot of talk and scuttlebutt about doing the same thing that Missouri is doing. So we have to see where this goes. This looks to be something very interesting that's developing out in the Midwest right now. How would something like that fly in New York City? I don't think it would. I think it would sink.
New York City. New York City. I mean, it's pretty much, even if you're if you're law enforcement,
you can't have a 16-ounce Coke in New York City, for God's sakes. That's a violent weapon.
Right. Well, in New York City, even if you're a law enforcement from another state and you're caught there with a firearm, you are going to face felony charges. I mean,
but my brother-in-law still is a cop up in New York City, and we were having that discussion one day, and of course, he said, all the guys he knows were like, there's no way that they're going to arrest another law enforcement or peace officer in any way, right? That's just a stupid law that they can't stand it.
There are stories of officers from out of state being arrested there. So
that's where I was going with that. Yeah,
you run into.
That's where I was going. He said, the guys that he knows would never do that to a fellow law enforcement officer. On the other hand, he said, there's some crackpots out there that are on the force. The force, NYPD is huge. And there's a lot of people that they just like to arrest people just for the fact that it looks good for them that they're arresting people.
I'll share with you a personal story about some people that I know in California. They're close family friends, husband and wife cops. And the wife told me when she was over at my parents' house visiting how her husband, who was a sergeant, loved getting domestic violence calls because that afforded him the opportunity to take out all his pent-up rage that he had growing up in a household with an abusive father who was violent against his mother. Do you think that is the type of individual we want out on the streets? There is no presumption of innocence when he would go to these houses. And in California, when I was practicing criminal defense, we had a saying. It said the last one to the phone goes to jail. What if this guy was actually a victim of domestic violence? He's the last one to the phone, and we've got a cop with a chip on his shoulder now that's going to act in a manner that is completely unprofessional. That just absolutely blew my mind. But going back to this article, I digressed a little bit, but it's important to keep these stories in mind, because police are a segment of the community just like everybody else, and they have their crackpots, and so do we. But what's interesting with this law out of Missouri is they're actually making, as you said, junk bond a criminal offense for these federal agents to interfere with the gun rights of their state citizens. This is what I have said, and I wrote an article about it. It's on my website, as well as the 10th Amendment Center published it, but it's hard to find those. So if you go to SuzanneCSherman.com, you'll see the article about the feds needing to step up to protect the gun owners who use medicinal cannabis. In Prop 2 out here in Utah, one of the aspects of the law was it prohibited state resources and agencies. As we know, according to the feds, if you use cannabis, even in a state where it's legal, you are not allowed to own or possess a firearm. Now, forget the fact that the feds are constitutionally prohibited from regulating either plants or firearms. They don't care. Nobody else seems to. But what I told Connor Boyack, the guy that was the moving force behind Prop 2 from Libertas Institute, I said, this doesn't go far enough, because all the state has to do is say, oh, we're not going to interfere, while the feds run roughshod over the rights of the citizens of Utah. So we're just not going to participate, but we're going to allow you to do that. I said, that's not enough. Just like in California with the case of Raich versus Gonzalez. Angel Raich was a lawful medicinal marijuana user, and she was using this to just survive. I mean, she was in so much pain from her malady. The feds, the DEA came in, and the sheriff just stood by while they took her plants and destroyed the ones that she was growing, and took the plants that she was using to alleviate her very painful condition, and the doctor prescribed this for her. They stood by. They did nothing. The feds need to be arrested when they engage in this unlawful behavior. They seem to think they are above the law. And that's what I like about this Missouri bill. And I talked to, one of my friends who's a constitutional expert, who said, well, they're just going to get arrested. What's going to happen? I had this conversation about the grizzly bear hunt in Wyoming, where Wyoming is telling the feds, I don't care what this federal judge says. Grizzly bears pose, unless managed, a danger to our farmers, our community, and our tourist industry, and we're going to have a hunt. We don't care what you say. Well, somebody's going to have a tag, they're going to hunt, and then they're going to get arrested by a federal agent. Well, again, it is up to the law enforcement of Wyoming to stand between their citizens and the state and the federal government, just like Kim Davis should have never been taken into custody in Kentucky.
I'm going to read a couple sections out of this bill. It's Senate Bill 367 in Missouri. It's Section A, Article 4 and 5. I'm not going to read all of 5. It's too long, but I'm going to start with this. Section A, Article 4. Whenever the federal government assumes powers that the people did not grant it in the United States Constitution, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Boy, did someone from there read the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions? It sounds like it. Article 5. The several states of the United States of America respect the proper role of the federal government, but reject the proposition that such respect requires unlimited submission. If the government created by a compact among the states was the exclusive or final judge to the extent of the powers granted to it by the states through the United States Constitution, the federal government's discretion and not the United States Constitution would necessarily become the measure of those powers. To the contrary, as in all other cases of compacts among powers having no common judge, each party has an equal right to judge for itself as to if infractions of the compact have occurred, and as well as to determine the mode and measure of redress. I could keep going. This is a fantastic bill, just reading Senate Bill 367.
It sounded like you were reading the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions for a minute.
Copy of the Virginia Kentucky resolutions.
Cut and paste.
Bravo on them.
Yeah, and this is what we need. I mean, we have Lindsey Graham and Stolen Valor Senator Blumenthal out of Connecticut. This is what he says: ammunition sales should be subject to the same legal requirements that should govern firearm sales, universal background checks. He calls this a ammo loophole, and criminals and domestic abusers can't own firearms under federal law, which is unconstitutional, and they're not supposed to be able to buy ammunition either. What do you mean they're not supposed to be? There's no law. You just don't think they should. So kudos to Missouri for having a little bit of common sense, but here is ultimately how they're going to lose. This will be ruled unconstitutional because people don't understand what the supremacy clause is. And even if they did, ultimately, we've got a movement now, and we'll wrap up the show with this topic. The Electoral College is under attack. Why? Because with Hillary Clinton, all of her cheating, all of her lying, every dirty trick they pulled from the dossier Donna Brazil, who, oh, by the way, has been hired by Faux News Network. Sorry, is anybody watching them anymore at all? Everything they did, they still lost. The media was in the tank for them. The educational system was in the tank for them. The DOJ, the FBI, you name it, Hillary still lost. Therefore, all focus now will be on the means by which the founders sought to avoid a democracy. Even Republicans refer to our system as a democracy. As long as we have this ignorance, the battle is lost. It's over. This is why I moved to the mountains. You know, I can pontificate here and try and warn everybody. And if people don't listen, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So we want to get rid of the Electoral College. So how are they going to do that? Absent a constitutional amendment pursuant to Article 5, because they know they will lose that. Well, the states constitutionally can do what they want with their electoral delegate votes. So now what we see is they are just signing compacts saying we will simply allocate our votes depending on what the popular vote is. Now, combine that with the 17th Amendment, and ladies and gentlemen, we are one big, fat, stinking pile of democracy. How's that going to work? Well, what's going to happen? What is a democracy? Mob rule, majority rule. This is how they will ultimately get the guns. This is why everybody's talking about civil war. How do we avoid this? By decentralizing, taking the state away. I submit to you when this happens, let me do a quick background here. We have a few minutes before we end the show. We've got about 12 minutes left. Mike Meharry from the 10th Amendment Center has a little set of courses called Constitution 101, and he talks about the Electoral College. We'll post this on our Twitter and then our page as well, what it is and why it matters. As I said, it's become a hotly contested issue because this is how they get away with what the founders wanted, was to have every state be relevant in our elections. What blows my mind is the states are slitting their own throats, much like during Obama's State of the Union speech, where he stood up and said, where Congress fails to act, I will. These jackasses stood up and applauded their own international castration right there for everybody to see. Oh, that's just great. And we think these idiots are going to fix anything. So again, by assigning their electoral votes, their delegate votes to the popular vote, we have a democracy and they will win. Nobody is going to care if something is constitutional or not. They already don't. We've argued all the time that this is a dead letter. I think at this point, maybe, just maybe, if this happens, we're going to have two options. There is either going to be wholesale violence. They talk about this being the second Civil War. It would be the first Civil War. Never before did the states go to war to control this national entity. Some wanted to leave. They had every right to do so. If everybody thinks that secession was the wrong thing to do, I urge you to brush up on your history and learn the truth, because this is going to come to the forefront of discussion by so-called conservatives who loved Lincoln. All of a sudden, when they realize that we have ultimately lost and we will never, ever have a president again who will even pretend to entertain the notion of gun rights, you're going to start thinking secession, you mark my words. Go ahead, guys.
I challenge you guys to put some books up that you had suggested reading. So the very first one I suggested, and my first suggestion to everyone out there, is Bledsoe's Is Davis a Traitor? Or Was Secession a Constitutional Right Prior to 1861? That book there is the ultimate defense of secession. Nobody has ever written a counter book to counter his arguments. It is the undisputed champion of secession, and it was Jefferson Davis's defense for his treason trial when they dropped the charges because they knew they'd lose, and it would show that they were wrong in attacking the southern states. They dropped the charges against them, and then Bledsoe penned this book with the defense, and that is my suggested reading. So if you're out there looking for a book to read, there's my suggestion. Suzanne and everyone else will offer theirs in the days to come.
The arguments and history he set forth in there are absolutely irrefutable. Can't recommend that book highly enough. And again, I want to turn back a little bit to what do you think? We have all these sanctuary gun cities now, all these federalism issues, but we also have states or areas within these cities that are saying, we're not going to enforce these laws. So again, let's assume the Electoral College passes or is a thing of the past. We have all the delegates going to the popular vote. We will never, ever have anybody that has any respect for firearms rights at all. So what about localities who aren't buying into even the state regulations? As we know, the states were ultimately the only bodies that had the authority to regulate firearms. We cheer on some of these sheriffs who say they're not going to enforce gun control laws. In fact, when I was in California, I had a friend who was on the SWAT. He was on the SWAT Santa Clara County Sheriff SWAT team. And he even said to me, if I ever am told to go out and confiscate guns, I already told my superiors I will not do it. Or if I will knock on your door. And as he's telling me this, he's moving his head like he's saying no from side to side. You don't have any guns in your house, do you? No, sir, I do not. Thank you. Have a nice day. He would leave. Ultimately, this guy left California and took his family to Idaho. But we have a Colorado attorney general saying that sheriffs who will not enforce gun confiscation should resign. So I submit to you two, what do you think your thoughts are on that? Should these law enforcement officials have an obligation to enforce all laws, whether or not they think they are moral and ethical? What if we have law enforcement officers that all of a sudden say, you know what, we're okay with pedophilia. We're not going to arrest you guys. Or should they follow all orders and just obey their orders and take the guns?
Well, that's a simple one because they took an oath. In my case, unfortunately, I took my oath to the Constitution of New York and then the Constitution of the United States, unfortunately. But in Pennsylvania, those officers take an oath to the Pennsylvania Constitution and the U.S. Constitution to defend it from all enemies, foreign and domestic. So if he's given an order that is in direct contravention to the Constitution, let's just use Pennsylvania because that's one actually has this protection in it. The Article 1, Section 21, right to bear arms, the right of the citizen to bear arms in defense of themselves and others, and the state shall not be questioned. So that's Pennsylvania's restriction on the state of Pennsylvania regulating firearms. So if this sheriff is ordered to confiscate firearms, that is in direct contravention to the oath that he took to defend the Pennsylvania Constitution. He has no obligation to obey that order.
But let's say, okay, you're in California, like my friend was. California's constitution is silent on firearms, meaning forget the Second Amendment. The 10th Amendment comes into play here. California decides to have an out-and-out ban on firearms. Now, are the sheriffs, are they going to take an oath to uphold, again, that's their constitution, and go door to door and confiscate firearms? Should they? At what point? Go ahead.
Yeah, so is this the moral issue? Is this the Nuremberg defense?
Exactly. It's kind of tricky because, again, I saw somebody just said, law enforcement officers take an oath to uphold all the laws. Well, that's really not the oath. They
They take the oath to defend the Constitution.
So if they believe
what it is.
So if you believe you're not defending the Constitution, do you actually take that extraordinary step and resign, or attempt to change the system?
I would refuse the order. It's as an unlawful order, and then I would probably be terminated.
Yeah, there goes your pension. You got 20 years in, and now all of a sudden you're going to take a moral stand and say, "I'm not going to do this." How many of them will really sacrifice?
Not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. So I see the news tightening on here. And this is what the Colorado Attorney General, Phil Weiser, who's a Democrat, says the sheriffs who refuse to enforce these gun laws should resign their posts. I submit to you, I wouldn't get into law enforcement. Again, I have some really good friends. We have some very loyal listeners that are the good guys that are on this, and they don't like what they see happening, by the way. But I would not be a law enforcement officer at all. I think legislators also have to understand we need to have fewer laws. The more laws we have, the more enforcement there's going to be. But again, every time somebody gets voted into office, they have to do something. I want them to do nothing. I want them to make less laws. And
I want them to repeal laws.
Yes. And we never see them come on a platform. No. We're going to scale back the government. Even Trump, who was supposed to be, for limited, well, he was never even for limited government. But when he talks about scaling back regulations and people are celebrating this and scaling back the debt, all they're really doing is slowing the growth. It always expands. So where do you guys see us in 20 years? Where do you see us in 10 years?
I know where I see myself in 20 years.
Honduras.
Yeah, there's a good possibility that it'll be Honduras or one of those other countries somewhere that still appreciates and understands a certain amount of liberty that people should be allowed to have in their life. And I say should be allowed to have because obviously there are many, many other organized states in the world here that are becoming much more intrusive. We've lost, that whole spirit of 76. I remember that when I was, we were at the, the bicentennial back in the day, the bicentennial, and everybody was waving flags and celebrating freedom and liberty. And I got to go back to Jeff Bridges. Bulgaria has freedom. England has freedom. France has freedom. Suriname has freedom to a certain extent. We're not the only ones with freedom. We're not the only ones that have a free market, although we're losing our free market because we are regulating and legislating ourselves into a trap that you're never going to get out of. If we don't pull the rug out from underneath this monster, it's going to consume every single person here.
Quickly wrapping up the story, Astoria out of Elko. Do we stand up now or when they come to get the guns? And this is a sheriff pontificating on what they do, what the role is going to be when they're going to round up the guns. And what he said here, and this is what's scary, he's well-intentioned but misinformed. This is a good example. We have a choice. Do we support the state government or the U.S. Constitution? It's a pretty easy choice to me. I'm supporting the U.S. Constitution. Oh my gosh. So here's a sheriff who took an oath to support and uphold the Constitution, and he thinks he's doing that. But what people don't understand is you have to ask, which Constitution? Which are you referring to? Well, they think they are incorporating the Second Amendment, and we have explained time and time again, by incorporating the Bill of Rights against the states is in direct contravention to our founding principles, and this will lead us to one big United States of America. We are one big democracy, and now, as we see this move to eliminate the spirit of the Electoral College, this is how they're going to win, and these well-intentioned SOs saying they will support the U.S. Constitution are playing directly into this, because now when the U.S. Constitution is irrelevant, what are they going to do?
Do you think it's pretty irrelevant right now? It's just in namesake.
I tell people, stop cloaking your argument. Those of you demanding a wall to be built, saying the Constitution gives the president this authority. No. At least be honest and say this is the post-1861 version of America that you say the national government has an obligation to defend our border. But please do not cloak this argument under the blanket of the Constitution. It says no such thing. We will have plenty more on this topic. We are out of time. 2 hours just flew by. On behalf of the rest of us at Cerberus Radio Network, I'm Suzanne Sherman. On behalf of Greg John Carpenter, Jeff Johnson, we want to thank you for listening. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody.